A female bodybuilding influencer suddenly passed away at 35 years old, and I don't really know if the world understands what happened to her. Johanna Pérez was a well-accomplished bodybuilder. She had 46,000 Instagram followers and was doing amazing within the sport of bodybuilding, sharing her workout routines, offering coaching, doing lots of cool stuff. Honestly, very successful. She recently just passed away only 3 days after her birthday, and so far there's a mystery, so-called, surrounding her death. No one knows what actually happened. She seemingly just passed away after leading a quote-unquote healthy lifestyle. Now, she seemed to be a wellness athlete, which in bodybuilding in the IFBB represents a category of bodybuilders who really want to develop their lower body. They're establishing what I would call a horse-like physique. Massive legs, glutes, and hamstrings, even calves, and a relatively more muscular but far less muscle than other bodybuilders kind of physique. I don't know if it's like some kind of hybrid. It's definitely an interesting take on the modern female physique, but it is a cool category that's been rising generally extremely fast for the past 3 years, and she was invested in it. She was head first in this thing. Now, if you scroll through her Instagram, she was posting a lot. And she was really into the bodybuilding lifestyle, talking about nutrition, training, and all of it very frequently. And I think it doesn't take long for someone to realize that her physique isn't necessarily obtainable naturally, clearly. Now, there is nothing against her. This isn't to besmirch who she is or what she's given to the bodybuilding community or the people she's helped or anything like that, but clearly she's abusing anabolic steroids and probably much more, like clenbuterol, other fat burners like thyroid, and probably an assortment of different peptides. And the reason that I know this isn't just from her physique, but it's from her voice.
De pie vas a vaciar todo el aire de tu abdomen y vas a contraer ese ombligo contra tu columna y vas a llevar tus brazos flexionados.
Te comparto mi entreno favorito de piernas del año junto a mi coach Guillermo Núñez.
¿Quieres unas piernotas poderosas? Pues acompáñame en esta rutina que está mortal.
You can tell it's highly masculinized, which is part of a secondary male characteristic that women develop when they start taking androgens. Their larynx and vocal folds start to swell and grow and hypertrophy because there's a lot of androgen receptors within that organ tissue, and as a result they get deeper voices that drop several octaves on the use or other side of using these specific steroids. Typically, in most women's cases, it's going to be Anavar, maybe injectable Primobolan at a lower dose. Who knows what else you could be running, especially when you're coming from alternative countries. I think America is definitely one of the leading countries in terms of PED using, people. I don't know. USA! I don't know if there's like a good way to put that, but I think America has leading coaches within the industry that recommend some of the quote-unquote safer practices within bodybuilding, whereas other countries are quite reckless with their practices. And the only reason that I say this is because I've, one, lived in those countries, two, I've seen the protocols and they are horrendous. In specific, one thing that I see a lot from these other countries is things like excessive clenbuterol abuse. Excessive. I'm talking ridiculous amounts of clenbuterol use. Now, if you don't know what clenbuterol is, it's a beta-2 agonist, and it's basically working on the adrenaline system, the adrenergic system. And what this does is it's supposed to be a bronchodilator for asthmatic patients, but what people use it for is metabolic rate increasing. And this happens because it will stimulate heart rate elevation, which by nature of it being a muscle increases calorie burn per day, but also it creates an individual situation where you have lipolysis. You're releasing fat from fat cells, breaking the glycerol backbone, dumping the actual lipids into blood, and then further burning them. It's a really favorable compound for fat loss, and specifically rapid fat loss, but it's not free lunch. And we've talked about this before on this channel with other deaths that have happened. The biology that you hack, no matter how you hack it, doesn't give you free lunch. It will always push back in one capacity or another. Now, specifically with clenbuterol, with thyroid abuse, and there's many other compounds that would be under that umbrella of lipogenic or basically fat loss inducing compounds, you have a problem, which is usually that those compounds are stimulant based. They are going to stimulate heart function. What happens is that because the heart is a muscle, it will hypertrophy from the stimulus. It will grow and become misshapen. And this misshapen cardiac tissue and a modified myocardium, it results in a improper heart function. Now, being that she was 35 years old at the time of death. She had likely, and it looks like from her Instagram, she's been doing this for a long time. And that means that the exposure to these compounds has been quite lengthy. And so a long enough career of abusing these forms of stimulants in conjunction with anabolic steroids, her heart function likely degraded massively. Again, in these countries, they're abusing this stuff beyond numbers that I could even comprehend. I don't know how women are doing this in certain countries like this. Males too. We've talked about males too. I've seen protocols and reviewed them with other coaches on the internet and their YouTube channels. They're disgusting. Like these protocols are actually disgusting, and they kill people. For sure, they kill people. With enough time, with enough dose exposure, these protocols kill people. Again, clenbuterol being one of the main culprits, using it at upwards of 160 to 200 micrograms in a given day, your heart is struggling to keep up. It is matter of fact growing to respond to the drug use. And as it does that, it becomes less and less functional. You get a lower and lower ejection fraction until you reach a critical mass of heart failure of some kind. This could be many different forms. We had Boston Lloyd, who literally had an artery explode, leaving his heart. A crazy situation. We have had other athletes like Ilya Golem, who had heart failure as well. And it just seems that this is the perpetuating theme within bodybuilders, either some form of heart failure or sudden death, which they won't disclose why they died, and likely will be the case with this one too, because to save face, it's better not to admit that you're abusing various PEDs. So here's the thing with this, right? And this is why I'm really bringing this up, because I'm sorry that Johanna Pérez has passed away. It's definitely not awesome. I'm very sorry for her friends and family, and it definitely sucks, because the thing is, right, the point I'm trying to make, bodybuilding is a very selfish pursuit. It is filled with helping people, but at the end of the day, when you're trying to work on you and you are the sole proprietor of your success, it does become very self-centered. And part of that self-centeredness is using dangerous compounds in excessive amounts to achieve a net result. Now, that in and of itself doesn't sound like it's inherently harming anyone else, but when you have many other people, family, a husband, a wife on the line, it is extremely, extremely selfish. There's a lot of ways to look at this, and I too am a bodybuilding coach, so I'm talking about this from a side of being in the trenches, seeing protocols, giving protocols, all of that good stuff. There is so much thoughts on what works and what doesn't. And there is this old school mentality that basically devoids itself of any mechanism of action. It devoids itself of any clinical research. It says that, hey, we've witnessed this work in trial, and so it's far better than anybody else and what they have to recommend. You see this all of the time perpetuated within bodybuilding and from bodybuilding coaches, from athletes. It's disgusting. It's honestly one of the worst misuses of, interpreting general logic. You can't just abuse drugs in ways that don't make sense because it's worked for you. You have to understand mechanism of action, especially understand mechanism of action when you're implementing polypharmacy, multiple drugs at once to achieve one net result. It becomes so exponentially more dangerous. For example, clenbuterol pretty clearly associated with cardiac dysfunction. Can you manage it? Yeah, you can. You actually can do that very easily. One great way is just not using it.
Obviously.
Another great way is by simply limiting the dose exposure and not going crazy high. This stuff is, after all, approved for human use. People can consume it safely, but people take it so far to one end of the scenario, and they're using multiple hundreds of micrograms to achieve a single result. Oftentimes, I've seen females using upwards of 75 to 100 micrograms of T3, which is basically cytomel, or T3 is it's a thyroid version. It's a synthetic thyroid, right? T3 is the active form of thyroid within the human body that fuels and functions the metabolism. It results in cardiac dysfunction as well. And so you plaster these things on top of one another, you end up with a catastrophe. And again, it's not going to happen immediately. It never will. And so you might get away with it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, but maybe that 6th, maybe that 7th, maybe that 8th cycle is where it's really going to smack you across the face. Now, like I say with all of this stuff, there's an easier way to do it. You can do these things and be generally safe. And this is why education and openness about this topic is so important. But being safe implies that you also have to understand what you're doing to yourself. Because if Johanna doesn't even know what she's taking, her coach is just giving it to her and saying, take this for the best results, you're going to become an IFBB pro and get the prestige title. Is she really at fault for that? Probably not. It's the coach's responsibility to be educated, to understand the nuance of drugs and the mechanisms of action within these drugs. And so it's a very dangerous field. It's a very dangerous field. Unfortunately, she had to pass away again. We see all too many individuals from this country pass away, and it sucks. She had a 14-year-old son and was on vacation with her family when this all happened, so it's not a great experience. I can't imagine what her son is going through, but just understand, if you want to use PEDs, I'm not going to be the guy to tell you no. I think that's a stupid and honestly communistic way to look at how to manage people's health, which shouldn't even be your fucking responsibility. You can have opinions, that's fine, but you don't own people. You can't tell them what to do. I would rather tell you how to do it in a educated format. I would rather explain what these things do and how they work so that people don't do these stupid things. So yes, if you are going to use fat burners, clenbuterol, thyroid, T4, understand that there is some degree of cardiac stimulation, and this can be from mild to extremely severe and is hyper individually dependent. For example, I can't take 20 micrograms of clenbuterol. It fucks me up. Some people can tolerate 140 micrograms without even having an elevated heart rate. It is completely individual. Please understand that these things don't come without risk, and every pill, potion, and injection you put into your body will represent some degree of burden on the systemic system of you. Understand those risks. Understand how much of them are going to be applied. Don't just let a coach tell you what to do. Inspect, be a skeptic, and even if my clients are watching this, be a fucking skeptic. Don't take, hey, here's your protocol, and don't take it and be like, yeah, great, implementing it. Because likely, some of the time, if not all of the time, those coaches don't know a fucking thing that they're talking about. So be safe out there. Don't be ridiculous. You should live a long life and be happy.